There were days when the Titanic breathed with ordinary human life. Children laughed on its decks. Women discussed dresses and letters they planned to send from New York. Men spoke of work, plans, and a future that felt unshakably secure. No one hurried. No one imagined danger. The Titanic was believed to be the safest place on the ocean, a floating city where nothing could fail. Within those walls, everyone carried their own story. Some were traveling to their first job, some returning to their families after long years, some hoping to start life anew. There were young couples dreaming of marriage, wealthy families convinced the world belonged to them, and deep below, workers fed coal into the furnaces through the night, thinking only of finishing their shift to catch a few hours of sleep. But none of them, not one, knew that the calm whisper of the ocean would soon become their final lullaby. That everything would end, not slowly, not naturally, but with a single merciless twist of fate. There was room for everyone on the Titanic. In the grand halls of first class, music echoed while guests debated politics and new inventions, convinced they lived in an age of triumph. In second class, people read books, wrote in their diaries, and dreamed of how their lives would change once they reached America. In third class, mothers put their children to sleep, young men teased one another, and families shared their last bread and their greatest hopes. Every day began the same, with the smell of morning coffee, the steps of stewards, and the clatter of dishes. Everything felt so right, so predictable, so peaceful. Even the vast cold ocean did not seem like an enemy, but a long road the ship had to travel to fulfill someone's dreams. But fate does not warn. It does not give time to think, to escape, or to beg for mercy. It arrives suddenly, at the exact moment when a person expects it the least.
And when the night approached that invisible line, separating life into before and after, no one aboard the Titanic understood that their safe world had already begun to crumble. That evening unfolded like any other. Musicians played on deck. Couples walked beneath the cold stars, feeling nothing but the fresh wind and the gentle vibration of the ship. In the first-class dining room, they served exquisite dishes, and guests laughed, raising their glasses to a smooth journey. In second class, someone wrote a letter home, carefully shaping every word. In third class, mothers pulled blankets tighter around their children, hoping the cold drafts would not wake them. Someone dreamed of a new job. Someone thought about a loved one left behind. Someone imagined a new life waiting in America, as if the future were already reaching out to them. Nothing hinted at danger. Not a single heart felt fear. No one heard the shard of fate already flying toward them. No one sensed that their stories, their joys, mistakes, plans, and love would vanish in the coming moments. Everything that felt eternal was quietly slipping away while they lived, laughed, and dreamed, unaware that this was their final peaceful night. The Titanic carried so many different destinies that the ship itself felt like a vast book, each page a human life. Some pages turned slowly and peacefully, others were filled with hopes and new beginnings. There were wealthy passengers who believed nothing in the world could touch them. There were immigrants for whom this ship was a chance to escape poverty. Families who spent their last savings on tickets. Children who barely understood what the ocean was and greeted each day as an adventure. None of them thought about death, for it feels too distant when a person is laughing, making plans, and holding the hand of someone they love. Workers in the boiler rooms joked as they hauled coal, convinced that many shifts still lay ahead. Stewardesses encouraged passengers as if their own lives held no room for fear. Officers checked their schedules, certain that their route followed the safest waters on Earth. All these people lived, breathed, and loved, and none of them realized that their stories were already nearing their end. Not tomorrow, not someday, but on that very night when calmness revealed itself as nothing more than a thin shell above the abyss. And yet that night the Titanic carried a special kind of silence, the kind that comes before the most important turn in a person's fate. People went to sleep thinking about tomorrow. In first-class cabins, golden lamps dimmed and soft music faded behind doors. In second class, someone reread old letters, remembering home. In third class, young women whispered about what awaited them in America, believing the new world was already within reach. Everyone believed that thousands of such days still lay ahead, that everything would remain calm, familiar, and safe, that nights at sea were simply nights, nothing more than cold air and distant stars. But at that very moment when dreams were closer than ever, fate was already standing on the threshold. It always arrives quietly. It does not knock, it does not warn, it does not send signs. It simply changes everything with a single moment that divides life into two parts, the one that was and the one that will never be again. People aboard the Titanic continued to laugh, talk, sleep, and dream. No one sensed the invisible crack already running through their world, a crack that history would one day call a tragedy, though then it was just another cool night on the ocean. And perhaps the most striking thing is how peaceful and ordinary their final night truly was. People, unaware of their fate, kept making plans. A young man in second class rewrote a letter to his future employer, trying to make every sentence perfect.
A girl in third class secretly studied a photograph of her beloved waiting for her in New York, hoping their reunion would be as beautiful as she imagined. In first class, an elderly couple discussed which places they would visit once they arrived in the new world. None of them considered that time could simply stop, not because they were naive, but because life felt too loud and too real. Someone was already asleep, their face buried in a warm pillow. Someone was just beginning their evening, sitting in an armchair and listening to music through the thin walls. Someone finished their shift, dreaming of a few hours of rest. They believed they controlled their tomorrow, that the future would obey their plans, that a great ship meant safety, stability, and strength. But fate never asks if a person is ready. It simply arrives, and in one instant, everything becomes different. And that night on the Titanic, each person had their final thought, though none of them knew it was the last. Each person on the Titanic carried their own small universe, and all these worlds existed inside one great ship that seemed unbreakable. Someone worried about starting a new job. Someone wondered whether their family would be welcomed in America. Someone dreamed that their children would grow up in a land with more opportunities, more light, and more promise. People laughed, confessed their feelings, prayed, wrote letters, and dreamed of the future. Each lived their own story, unaware that all their paths would soon collide at a single point where everything would end at once. An old carpenter was traveling to see his son after 10 long years. A young couple took their first journey together, building plans for a long life. A 10-year-old girl in third class listened to her mother promise a new dress in New York. Officers on the bridge discussed the course, certain the night was calm like so many before it.
But fate does not distinguish rich from poor, adults from children, or those traveling for work from those traveling for hope. It does not choose, it simply decides. And all these people, so different and so alive, still had no idea that their stories would end the same way. Suddenly, delicately, and tragically cut short. And yet no matter how much people tried to steer their lives, none of them could imagine that fate had already begun closing the pages of their stories. Nothing warned them of the end, not the music, not the laughter, not the calm whisper of the ocean. Everything moved forward as if the future truly belonged to them. But that night, time chose a different path, and every life on that ship paused on its final thought, final breath, and final hope. And today, so many decades later, when we remember them, we are not remembering the tragedy of a vessel, we are remembering the people whose dreams ended too soon. Their voices faded, but their stories remained. They survived in letters, in photographs, in memories, in the way the world changed after that night. And perhaps that is why the memory of the Titanic still feels so heavy, because it is not a story about a ship. It is a story about people, about each person who believed that life would go on, that tomorrow would always come. But for them, tomorrow never arrived.